Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Clubfoot, Big Mansion. A series of posts on X around 200 GMT. 30/11. Okay, the story I'm going to tell you happened to me this year in March, the night before my birthday. I can't give any more details than that, because this is a true story, and I am extremely worried. Please tell me what I should do. I should explain. I was at home, like usual, up in my room drinking. I knew that I'd be drinking, so that morning I had only pretended to take my pills, Prozac and Diazepam. If I drink after taking my pills, I get drunk and pass out much easier. Without my medicine, I tend to get visual and sound hallucinations, hearing voices that give me delusions. I can only identify which things I saw and heard, and which things I did that were irrational when I'm medicated. I should make that clear. Alright, so by around 7 p.m., I was already a bit wasted, getting ready to go out. I snuck out the back way of my house. My parents weren't letting me leave the house alone, since my psychiatrist said that although I hadn't been diagnosed with anything yet, still haven't been, it wasn't safe for me to be out alone or to be drinking. But alcoholics find a way, don't they, XD? I headed down to the town square to meet up with some friends, and we hit the pub anyway. After a couple of hours, we got chucked out, and a few hours after that, we'd been kicked out of another 2 pubs. That kind of gives you an idea of how fucked we were when my friends bailed out on me. I was left with a long walk home alone. Seeing as I was almost blackout grade shitfast at that point, I wasn't frightened to be walking back into town that late at night. It's a smallish rural town in England, the type where everyone are friends and possibly relations. Halfway home, I was passing one of the pubs I got chucked out of earlier, and I decided to pop back in for one last drink. I went into the beer garden, which was empty, apart from one guy standing by the fence with a beer and a CIG in his hand. He made a gesture meaning that he wanted me to come over, and when I did, he said something like, "You thirsty, sweetheart?" Obviously, I was, and he let me take a couple gulps of his drink. I think it was Guinness. He was very short. I mean, not a dwarf, but a bit shorter than me, and I'm only 5'2". Despite that, I remember thinking he was alright looking. Cute, posh kind of face, blonde or brown hair, and an expensive looking shirt, black coat, and a nice tie. He was a fair bit older than me, but not too old, about 27 at the most. I guess we started talking, but I can't remember what about, and he was buying me drinks whenever I wanted. I came with him to and from the bar and never let my glass out of sight, so I absolutely know he never put anything in the drink. Remember that? I noticed he had long fingers actually. That's the only solid, definite fact I remembered about him. His But even if he was 6 foot tall, his fingers would have looked just a tiny bit wrong. The palms were an arrow and normal size too. And I told him something like, "Your hand looks like a lizard foot." I guess because I mentioned feet, he told me that he had a club foot. I remember him limping, so I guess it was true, but I don't remember seeing the actual foot. He persuaded me to take him back to my house, presumably for sex. But what he actually said was that he wanted to see my house. That's not as weird as it sounds. In my town, there are only two big houses. My house and the house. Next door, the local kids call our house the little mansion, and the house next door the big mansion, which has been empty for about 6 years now. Our house isn't really a mansion. It's just bigger than the local council houses. But the house next door genuinely could be called a mansion. Not a manor house or anything, but it's still huge and Georgian looking. Painted duck, egg blue builders were and still are working on the patch of land that would otherwise have separated the two houses, redoing the border of the property since it had recently come up for sale. Since the builders had destroyed the hedge, it was now possible for the first time to cross the building site and see, and even enter, the big mansion's garden. I'd never been over there before. Clubfoot and me were almost at the driveway leading to my house, looking down it, though I noticed the lights still on in my house in the distance. There was no way I could bring a guy home and walk him straight past my parents, who were no doubt already hugely pissed off by that point. I suppose he'd figured this out for himself, and he said, "Did you know there's a pool next door?" I was surprised by this, because where I live it's extremely uncommon to have a swimming pool in your garden. But after living next door to one for 8 years, I was only just finding out about it. So, in classic horror movie style, we stumbled across the building site, across the big mansion lawn, over to their pool, which was surrounded on 3 sides by a high concrete wall. The pool was full, but luckily I decided to check. It was clean by the light of my mobile phone. It was covered in a thick green scum. No skinny dipping for me. We both slumped down by the wall, and he got out a can of beer. He also got out some tiny white pills which he said were Ritalin, and he took what I thought was a lot of them, like 7 or 8. I had to then, he started texting someone, and said he was arranging someone to come and meet us. I suppose at the time I assumed he was calling a dealer for something, so I didn't ask any questions looking back. There's no way that could have been the case. Not in a small town like mine. But when I was in Florida and London I could call dealers, so I suppose I had just got confused. Things started to get too sharp to be in focus and surreal, kind of cloudy, and I remember thinking to myself, I've blacked out. I'm going to black this out. Not a memory in my head in the morning. I had lost all sense of time, or even the order of time. I can't tell you for sure that this is the order, that the events that follow happened in, or if they even did happen. But I think what I have here is right. I saw a man walking across the lawn towards us, and the security floodlights switched on behind him, making him like a silhouette. He had his arms raised, like he was showing us he was unarmed, like in a movie. Clubfoot was telling me that this man was a friend, and he discussed it with us, and he loves the idea, whatever the idea was. When he reached us, there was possibly a brief conversation I didn't hear, and Clubfoot told me to give him a cigarette, which I did. He took a loose scalpel blade from somewhere and split open the CIG, and put something inside it, weed I suppose, but the way he sprinkled it made me think it was a powder, then somehow sealed it up again, maybe with a Rizzler. I remember walking sideways around the perimeter of the house, laughing, with my cheek, breasts and palms pressed against the wall. I was still wearing my bra, but my shirt was around my elbows. I was erasing a chalk line that Clubfoot was drawing on the wall as he walked in front of me, singing song in like German or Dutch maybe, and the other man was following behind me. walking half upright like a chimp or a caveman, smoking the cigarette Clubfoot had made. I figured it was good and I asked for it, Oak, but Clubfoot said I definitely couldn't have any of it. The only light now was from the floodlight, and I remember it was light 3 times. So I suppose we must have circled the house 3 times as well. The chalk was red or maybe orange in the light, and I guess the 3rd time round, he gently pulled me away from the wall so I wasn't damaging the line, and he put the other man's hands in my hands so I could lead him around. I could barely see the man at all, but I remember feeling that he was gorgeous, and my age, if not younger, and I was happy to lead him. I think I thought we were dancing. Then more things happened, but I can't describe them. In my head they lie there like random images from a dream. I can distinctly remember Clubfoot handing me some kind of tool with a handle. It might have been a knife, as I held it in my fist, but I don't think it had a blade. Maybe it was a switchblade or something, but I don't know as I've never seen one. He told me to stab the window, and I did. It was, I think, the window in the living room of the big mansion, and it broke, making a hole about the size of my head. Then there's a long blank bit of memory where it seems like I was blindfolded or had my eyes closed, but there's a feeling of movement. My next memory is of standing in the carpeted front hall of the house and trying one of the door handles and finding that the door is locked. Footsteps going up the stairs. I'm following excitedly, calling out the name of Clubfoot Man, which I've now forgotten. At the top of the stairs, I see them turning a corner at the end of the landing. I had the knife-type thing, or whatever it was, in my hand, but in my next memory it's gone. I hear someone breathing heavily, or maybe just whispering quietly at someone. The pipes in the house tapping, and the creak of mine and Clubfoot's limping steps. Where had the other men gone? I think I asked Clubfoot that aloud, but I'm not sure. He was pressing me up against a metal chain link fence, the one that's around the building site. We weren't outside again, and I think maybe he was kissing me, or licking my face with his cold tongue. His saliva tasted rusty, like brass and salt, and thick. Then I was alone, trudging exhaustedly up the back stairs of my house to my room. I woke up fully clothed, and on top of my covers. Luckily, I hadn't puked in my sleep. My cheek, hands and chest were almost black with dirt and pinky red chalk, and the black boot side and wearing were caked with mud and a sticky brownish orange substance I couldn't identify. I dumped them in the bath and sprayed them with the shower. The water ran red for a bit. Then I got in the shower myself and washed. I didn't feel hungover, just under-medicated. I noticed half-moon-shaped marks on my lower arms, probably marks from fingernails. Wide scratches on my chest, above my boobs, and on my wrist. There was a bad taste in my mouth, and one of my incisors felt different shaped. I could remember a man suddenly. I was terrified that I'd been raped, but I wasn't in any pain. I wasn't bruised, and there was no residue, if you know what I mean. So I quickly relaxed again and put it out of my mind. Then I heard my mother screaming for me to come downstairs, and I spent the rest of my birthday in tears, getting yelled at, and promising never to go out drinking ever again. Over the next couple of weeks, I wasn't allowed out of the house at all, not even into the garden, for fear of what I might get up to. I had no idea what it was my family that I was going to do that was all that terrible. Apart from drinking, maybe they thought, was also shoplifting or harassing people, something like that. So I stayed inside and studied for my exams. Then the weather suddenly changed, and it got unseasonably hot for a British April. It was actually hotter here than it was in Rome. My parents gave in to my begging and let me go outside to sunbathe while I worked. From our front garden, I can see across into the big mansion's garden, but my view of the ground floor is blocked by the walls of the swimming pool. I was looking over in that direction and thinking about the weird night I had. The night the day before my birthday. Specifically Clubfoot Man and his long skinny fingers, which was the only definite thing I could remember of him. As time had passed, I'd come to remember brief images of the night, but still hardly anything at all. As I said, I was sunbathing outside while revising biology. Then I saw my parents in the car, driving down the driveway and off into town. I suppose they'd forgotten that I was outside, not locked in the house like they probably intended. I was really excited, suddenly having freedom for at least a little while, but I didn't know what to do with it. I just started wandering, at first onto the building site, and then into the big mansion's garden. I walked around one of the concrete walls and into the swimming pool area, where I messed around a bit, lazily tossing stones into the murky green water. I was sitting with my back to the wall, and I realized that this was exactly where I'd sat with Club Love weeks earlier. The mark where we put down the beer can was still there, in the dust. I thought of him, and for the first time also remembered the other man who was there. I wondered if we'd had sex that night in a dreamlike state, as I often am when I've taken my medication. I got up and walked around the pool, dragging my feet. I remember dragging my body along the wall of the house, and before I knew it, I was halfway across the lawn, walking towards the big empty house. I tried the back door, shaking the door handle, but it was locked. I heard a clinking sound, like metal on tile, looking through the letterbricks. I could see the key that was in the lock now lying on the floor inside. Wasn't it strange that it had been locked from the inside? Weight was NTI inside. And sure enough, I had a memory, standing in the hall with a smile on my face, calling a name I couldn't remember, holding a hard object in my hand. I looked again through the letterbox, kneeling down so I could see more of the hall, to the park with carpeting. There were a series of marks on the floor, footprints, the ones on the right normal, but the left feet dragged. The person was limping. They were in mud or some other oily, sticky-looking substance, and brownish. I thought, the soil round here is kind of a reddish-brown. I walked down to close around the house, following the semi-faded chalk line that Clubfoot had made, trying all the doors, and they were all locked. The wind was starting to get a little cold, and I mentally checked whether I'd had my medicine, but I had, so there was no reason for me to be feeling like I felt. I came across the window I had broken, and it was different from how I remembered it. The hole was bigger, almost the whole window pane gone, and on the ground in front of the window were pieces of broken glass, spotted with brown earring stuff, the same stuff which had seemingly dried running down the wall from the window. I touched it, and it flaked off on my finger, leaving behind a red stain on the wall. Now there was a cold feeling just below my lungs. The glass crunched under my boots as I carefully leaned my head through the window and looked to the right. The door to the room was open. I was halfway back through the window, intending to knock the rest of the glass out so I could climb through safely, when I noticed something else. The footprint side, seen in the hall, ended at the entrance to the room. and now I saw a mark on the door. I rummaged in my bag for my glasses and put them on. It wasn't a mark. It was a print. In the rusty substance, I'm starting to fear is blood. The dripping print of a hand. A hand with very long and very narrow fingers. I twisted my ankle in the sprint back to my house, upstairs, to my bedroom where it's safer. I haven't had a single drink since then, and I've been meditating, and I just can't remember what I did that night, in that house. I can't find the men I was with. Nobody knows who they are, in this town where everyone knows everyone, and nobody's heard of anyone who knows a man with a club foot. I know that everything I've forgotten is in the house, upstairs, around the corner. I could even get a whole set of keys from the estate agent, if I wanted, and go in and see for myself if only I wasn't so deeply afraid of what I'd find there. What appears to be a self-bunk, around 400 GMT. I don't know what to do. I know this all sounds like a bad story, and it is, but it's all completely true. I need help, please. I need to know how I can escape from this. The same day, around 700 GMT. I'm going back to look, before people wake up. Batadam bottles to law will take pictures if I see any find USB for my phone. I'm building site NW. Door stel LOC. At going in window. Fuck FCK. In my head's bleeding fuck. Think there's glass in my head, can't get back out. Print's gone. Looks like it's been scrubbed with something, still a mark on the door. Gotta get out. WTF, there's no key in the fucking hall. Footprint's been scrubbed as WEL. Heard something upstairs. Going up to see, stairs, scrub, see photos in a min. Can't use scammer anymore, phone also SMT out of battery. Will keep you guys updated, wish me luck law. There's a mark on the wall at the end of the hall. Another handprint, looks fresh. Wall, doors locked, except end of the hall. Trying it now. Help me. Help me. Itchy LPME 50. 7,130,040. 3.54 thousand. 801 HELPME. 758 GMT. Help her. Come and help her. We need one more. The second story. The haunted ship. The story begins on a ship in the middle of sea. The crew was crossing over heavy waters, as such experienced horrible weather and other things of that sort. But that was just a minor reason why everyone was so frightened. There were rumors of the ship being haunted by a dead pirate. Idiotic, right? The rumors are that a pirate was the grandfather of the person who owned the ship. His conquests were near godly, as the whole sea feared him, as he went to tell his grandson that his treasures would be his when he died. The grandson, being impatient, killed the useless old man in his sleep to obtain the promised reward. He did of course obtain it, and with it he purchased the ship. The first rumors of the haunting happened in the year of 1881, when a body was found with its centrals spread across the deck of the ship, spelling out the words BAIN. The grandson simply bribed the press to keep it silent. The next event occurred on May the 18th, 1891. An elderly woman was found missing her eyes with a blade in her torso. Blood spelled out the name of the grandson, Puri, but it still seemed to spell his name out. The grandson once again bribed the press to keep it silent. The latest event happened at January 1st, 1901. 5 children were found dead, with each of their skulls filled with golden coins, and their intestines were spilled on the floor. This one was a little harder to cover up, but still he managed. However, the only testimony was the parents of the children crying. The ship was rocking in a horrific manner, moving each and every one of the people on board around. I was in the cabin, scared and young. This was my 12th birthday, so I really was just worried about my presents falling off the side. I wish I were far more intelligent back then. It would have saved me a large amount of pain. The items in the cabin shook violently as my mother held me in a warm, loving embrace. I could have sworn I saw a man with a cutlass, though I was most likely imagining things. My hands began to drip with blood as my mother's body felt a lot colder all of a sudden, and her glistened as she fell to the ground dead. She only had the lifeless stare that death offers. I jumped back with rivers of tears streaming down my face, while the man with the cutlass resumed walking towards me, with a look of evil glee upon his face. I began to leave the room, but the door slammed shut when I reached it. I was cornered and scared. I tried to swing something at him to distract him, but my arms went right through as he delivered a slash, severing one of my hands. I screamed out in doubt and pain as blood gushed out of the wound. The man disappeared as the door slowly opened, a rat having wrapped up my arm in my sleeve to stop excessive blood loss. Outside were the bodies of the crew, lifeless and cold, just like my mother, though they seemed far happier with it, as they stood up and began to walk towards me. I screamed in terror as I ran away from the walking corpses. Without any hesitation, I went to dive off the side of the ship, but a force was holding me back from escaping the hell which I was in, so I ran up to the top area of the ship and found a rusty sword. I knew it would do me little good, but I tried in vain to hold back the damned, nearly passing out from blood-loss adrenaline, and the only thing keeping me going. I locked the door behind me, and the scratching of the dead were heard. As I passed out, everything became more and more blurry. I awoke in a strange bed. I did not know where I was as I tried to move my arms. To move, I realized I was chained. I let out, and then I was greeted with a dark voice saying and demoralizing things to me as he drew a knife and began slicing at my torso. The pain was almost unbearable. I really wish I had died right there. But sadly, I did not. The monstrosity, which was and walked out of the room. As I slowly lifted into the air, my wrists bleeding as souls of the damned pulled me towards them, I screamed in horror to no avail, seeing as I was alone in such a scary place. I missed my mother so much and my family. I lost hope and nearly was dragged to what I believe was hell. But then I awoke in that room, the damned still scratching at the door. I looked at myself. My wrists were slit, as well as a large amount of scars running across my body from the blade. The door broke open as the damned tore me into small pieces and devoured my flesh. I even lived until the very end of it. All now, I exist only as a spirit of torment upon the ship where so many other lives were taken. The third story. He haunts my dreams. I was always a little different compared to others, like when I would have dark thoughts of killing my friends and family. My parents even took me to therapists and others that would try to help me, but they would give me back, yelling to never to bring me back and to lock me up. I've had these dreams. Well, I think more of them as memories I have, but never really think about it anymore. Now that I'm stuck here, nowhere else to run, I have accepted it. I've realized that I'm just different, crazy even. But to my dream or memory, whichever you prefer. In my dream, I'm with my friends at school and we're talking, having a good time before the bell rings eventually. We have to get to class and then everyone just fades away and I'm all alone. Or so I think. I start walking the halls looking for anyone when I find two of my friends, Connor and John. I ask them where everyone went. They get cut off all the time. I can never hear what they say. Connor had to use the restroom, so we wait outside while he went. 10 minutes go by and John and I start to worry, so we knock on the door. No answer. When we open the door, we found him decapitated, with his head laying in a pool of blood. There's flesh splattered everywhere. Then a drop of blood landed on my shoe. I looked up to see a man. I can only make out the scars all over his face, blood dripping from his hands. Then the man says, "I'll give you a 10-second head start. Run." John and I both take off in separate directions. Everything fades black as I run. All I hear are screams from a faint light on the other side. Inside the light, an empty classroom. I found myself running and hid in a closet. I was in there for about 5 minutes. Then I heard John scream, and then everything went silent. I heard someone walking into the room. Do they know I'm here? Then he knocked on the door. "If you come out now, I will give you a 60-second head start. But if I have to pull you out of there, you're as good as dead." I broke out of the closet and started running as fast as I could. It felt like I was being pulled back all the time, like it had to be done. I ran into the bathroom and hid in a stall. The only thing I can whisper, "This is just a dream. This is just." The stall door, it disappeared like light fading into the deepest of darkness. He walked, no, not walk that. As to human, it was more glide than walk. He whispered, like he was right at my ear, "You were always the hardest one to get." He jumped out of the ground. A ghostly being grabbing my hair and throwing me into the wall, stunning me. I tried to scream, but it was no use. Nothing came out. He dragged me to the nearest classroom and locked me in there. I couldn't move. It felt as if I was stuck to the ground, lying on the floor for hours, until he finally came back with what looked like, well, more of a darkness that surrounded him, covered him. He floated right towards me. I struggled to move, but my body was too stiff, for I knew what was about to happen to me. Then the darkness swallows me, waking me up at last. Most nights I have a panic attack, and other nights I throw up from the horror of my past. It is only a dream after all. I mean, those kids needed to be taught about death.